Welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion of the human factors analysis and classification system, today talking about the unsafe supervision and organizational influences. So as we progress through, we've talked about the unsafe acts of operators, those people at the pointy end of the spear. We talked about those errors and violations that people commit and how we could design and intervene and mitigate the consequences of some of those actions. And then we talked about the preconditions for unsafe acts, those things that set us up for failure, if you will, those things that make us, what was different that day than any other day when you were operating in your situation. So what I want to talk about now, though, is something that a lot of us overlook, which would be those factors at the very highest levels. So we're talking about the supervisory and organizational tiers. Supervisory tier being middle management. As a middle manager myself, and let me just get us started here, as a middle manager myself, both in the military and in the civilian sector, when I was in the military, I was a Navy captain, before that a commander, a lieutenant commander, and so on. That's really middle management. So we're not talking about admirals and generals. We're talking about the people that are really the middle management of an organization. So what we're talking about is that first, second, third level supervisor. And as a manager both in the Federal Aviation Administration and then in the military, my job was to give people the opportunity to succeed. That means I had to provide them the tools they needed to do the job, to do it right. And actually, when we look at unsafe supervision or supervisory factors, we really look at four things. We look at inadequate supervision, planned inappropriate activities, failed to correct known problems, and supervisory violations. And let me walk through these. I mean, this is really something that's better left to industrial organizational psychology, but we're just going to give you a quick and dirty overview in this particular human factors course, just to give you a sense for what sorts of things you might want to look at. Well, inadequate supervision. As I mentioned to you earlier, my job as a supervisor is to provide my employees the opportunity to succeed. That means I have to provide them oversight, guidance, mentoring, training, moral fiber, whatever it takes to get the job done, short of doing it myself. So, and probably to give you a good example, when I was a manager with the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, when I first got there, boy, I was motivated. I had about 30 some odd master's and PhD level people working for me. They were doing research in general aviation, commercial aviation, and air traffic control. And we had a very large budget to do that research both internally, in-house, and then externally through grants. And it was an interesting business because when I first got there, my people worked in teams. And so you had PhDs and master's level people working hand in hand doing a project. And when I first got there, I knew what everybody was doing. I spent a year trying to get in, basically putting myself in those teams and really getting embedded and understanding what they were doing and understanding the job. And we had appraisals. Basically, we would review people twice a year. We had a mid-year and an annual. And during those appraisals, my employees would come in, Dr. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so would come in and they would sit down and I'd say, "So Joe," because I've been embedded, I've been watching what they've been doing, I know what their research is, I know what their projects are, I know where they're at, I know what's going on. I'd say, "So Joe, I've been watching and yeah, you've been doing real well on that fatigue I saw the fatigue project just finished up, you just collected data from your last subject. I saw your last paper got published, that was fantastic, I read it. I see that you've also got a proposal out for the next study. I think that makes sense. It looks like we're going to fund it. There won't be a problem there. And I see that you wanted to add a team member. I think I've got... And we're having this discussion during his review, and I'm talking about all the things he's done, and I know what's going on. And when it came to the annual appraisal, where I had to actually write a review, and I had to, it was a formal thing with all kinds of grades and stuff on it, no problem, he comes in, I say, you had a great year, you had 6 pubs, you did all this work, you've got these projects going, fantastic job, here's your review, take a gander at it, take a look at it, tell me what you think, and if you agree with it, sign here on the bottom, and we would shake hands, and that'd be it. It was wonderful, and I had a lot of really good people working for me, so it was a really nice experience. But then after about a year or two, I started to get more and more involved in the FAA. I started getting called away to sit on committees in Washington and was on telecons, video telecons. involved in a lot of meetings and planning, and just the more I got involved with my management colleagues and higher up, because basically as a manager you keep moving up the chain. In order to move up the chain, you have to get on these national committees, you have to do all this other work. What ended up happening is I spent less and less time with my employees. So new employees would come in. I really wouldn't mentor them. I'd say, well, you know, there's your desk, there's your office, there's your computer, now go do what you do, right? I wasn't embedded in it as engaged as I once was in all these projects. So now when the mid-year review came around and Joe or Fred came in, and I'd say, Joe, sit down. So tell me what you've been doing. Why would I say it that way? Why would I have him tell me what he's been up to? Before, remember, I could tell him what he's been doing. Well, the simple truth is I really don't know. So we would have a discussion. So I'm basically getting a wrap-up from my employee that I'm reviewing about what he's done the last 6 months. So I'm not reviewing, he's just telling me. And when it came annual appraisal time, I would usually send out an email with, you know, hey, here's a electronic version of your review. Can you go in and fill in some bullets, some things that you'd like to see there, some nice things can you give me a list of your accomplishments? Why would I ask for that? Well, because I don't know anymore. And as a result, I had my employees more often than not writing their own reviews in many ways. And while I would tweak them, of course, but what happened was I became detached. And when supervisors, particularly those frontline supervisors, become detached, no longer do you have management, you basically have management by proxy. So you've got the employees managing themselves, and no longer are they getting the training that they're supposed to be getting, no longer are they getting the guidance, the oversight, the mentoring, and as a result, you'll see decay throughout your organization. And that's a real problem. So when I look at this, and I look at inadequate supervision in an organization, I know that it can have dramatic impacts. If I'm not providing you adequate training, it can lead to failures of communication, because somebody has to show you how to communicate well and plan and do all these things, which can lead to confusion, which is an adverse mental state, which can lead to bad decisions. So these things are all connected. The point being that when we see inadequate supervision, oftentimes we see things like communication problems, adverse mental states, which ultimately lead to the unsafe acts. If I could somehow bring that manager back to the fold, get him away from his computer and his email and the like, and get him back engaged with his employees, you'd be amazed how much more productive the organization becomes. Well, it goes beyond that. It goes into planning appropriate activities. You know, I kind of joked earlier about how you can sometimes we set people up for failure. As supervisors, sometimes we do. You know, if I take two knuckleheads, two guys that can barely fly their way out of a box, they're not the best pilots, and I put them on a mission at night, low level, in the weather, in the most dangerous environment, to put bombs on who knows what, and they don't come back? Anybody surprised? Well, no, they were knuckleheads, problem solved. But somebody had to put them there. Have you ever been put into a situation that was a little more than you could handle? And as a result, things didn't go quite so well. I mean, I would submit to you that that happens more often than we'd like to think. A lot of times, I see this in medicine. I see a lot of times nurses, particularly new hires or people that are very young, get thrust into a situation. They get thrust in the OR or to the ER, a new location. And everybody assumes they know what they're doing. I mean, after all, they were scheduled and put on that shift or put in that surgical suite. And now they feel compelled. So I've taken someone that's not necessarily qualified or proficient for that particular position, put them in that OR. As a result, they're feeling the pressure, adverse mental state, pressure to perform, but they don't have the knowledge in order to do some task. For example, maybe, pick any task in the OR, but they really are limited mentally. So we're looking at physical mental limitations. They don't have the knowledge base in order to succeed. Consequently, they make a bad decision. They choose a wrong drug. They push it too quickly. Whatever the case may be, they're trying to do the right thing, but we put the wrong person on the job. It happens all the time. It happens more often than we'd like to think. We also look at things like risk without benefit. Do we really have to do that now? Does it really have to be done today? I tell the story of how a lot of times management doesn't question. Have you ever been told you don't know how to say? You have to learn to say no. You can't just say yes all the time. Well, I grew up in the Navy where the answer is always yes, and you figure out how to do it in the morning. The fact is that I had an admiral who told me, when you answer that phone, you answer yes every time, and we'll figure it out. And that makes sense. I mean, I understand the point of that. But it goes beyond that. Think of it this way. When I left the FAA, last day on the job, one of the things about the federal government is Fridays are, you think Fridays are great days because, you got the weekend. No, Fridays were usually bad days. Because usually sometime around Friday afternoon, you get a phone call from Washington headquarters. And they'd say, oh, we need to know blah, blah, blah by close of business today so we can have it. I need it on my desk Monday morning so I can brief the administrator. The administrator is the head of the FAA. Or someone really important in the agency or in the administration. And so we would get it in Oklahoma City. We'd get a call around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It'd be 1 o'clock here in Washington. And it'd be drop everything, listen, something as silly as maybe, how many Cessna 172s crashed in Southwest region between 1995 and 2000? I mean, something trivial, but it takes time to figure that out. There's an analysis that has to take place. It might take 2 or 3 hours to figure that. But we have the answer. We can get the answer. And that's a reasonable question to ask if you're dealing with general aviation flight safety. And so we would get a call, and the call would basically say, well, we need this by the close of business today or first thing Monday morning for the administrator. And when they say administrator, oh my gosh, we're all running around like, oh, it's the big boss, we got to do it. And so I would go down the hall, and I'd find my people, and I would say, drop everything you're doing, we have to have this done by the end of the day. How many times you're going to find when you go out into the real world, or those of you that are in the real world now, it's drop everything, got to get this done right now. It happens all the time. Well, it was my last day at work, and I got that same phone call. I've already had my going away party, and I've turned in my badge. I'm all done. 4:30 that afternoon, I'm out of there. I'm unemployed. Well, we got that same phone call, and it happened to be a 3-day weekend. And so everybody's getting out a little bit early. They've got their hours in, so they're running around, and they're getting out there about 3 o'clock. So, but it has to get done. So I'm there working with a couple folks, and they're kind of antsy to get out of there, so I let them go, and I'm going to finish it up before I leave. Last day on the job. Well, I'm sitting there with it, and I'm working on it, and about 4:30 every day I get a call from my wife. It's pretty much what I expected. And it usually is, something like this. Hey, honey, what time are you going to be home tonight? And I'm working on this. I got this to finish up. I should be out normal time, which would be around 5 o'clock. That should get me home about 5:30. Oh, great. Well, I hope you had a good day. I know it's your last day. I'll see you when you get home. Well, 5:30, 5:45 rolls around, and I'm not home. My wife calls me. Where are you at? Well, you called my office phone. You know where I'm at. I'm in the office, obviously. Well, she says, well, I thought you were going to be home at 5:30. I planned dinner for 6, and I said, I understand. I'm sorry. The time flew away. I got about 20, 30 minutes to go, and I'll be done. I promise. I'll be home by 6:30. All right, no problem. I'll see you when you get here. Well, 6:30 rolls around, 6:45. I'm still not home, and I'm still at work. My wife calls me. She's not very happy this time. And the conversation wasn't nearly as polite. But in a nutshell, what she basically said, she said, hey, you're not employed anymore. What are you doing? Everybody's gone. Come home. And I'm like, well, but I got to get this. I'm almost there. I just got hung up. The computer messed up a little bit. I'm just about finished. 30 minutes, I'll be out of here, I promise. She says, Scott. And for the first time in my adult life, in my marriage, I was really listening to my wife. Because she said something. She said this multiple times before. But this time it really hit me. And this is something I really want you to think about. She said, Scott, will the world stop spinning if you don't get this done? I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, what am I doing? Everybody is gone. You can hear crickets in the hallway. It's so quiet because everybody's gone for their vacation, the 3-day weekend. And I'm still here, and I'm unemployed. I'm not getting paid. Well, I felt terribly guilty. I wrote a note to my boss. Said, Dave, sorry I couldn't get this done. I got almost all of it done. I hate to leave this, I hate leaving snakes in the drawer, sort of thing. But I just, it was silly. Why was I still there at 7 o'clock? So I left it. And I worried about it all weekend long. Monday morning rolls around, I call up Dave. Dave, hey, did you get my note? Oh, yeah, I got it, no problem. I said, oh, man, I am so sorry leaving you. I know there's probably about another hour's worth of work. If you can have Carla or Callie or somebody work on that, I'm sure they can wrap it. He says, Scott, what are you doing? Don't worry about it. Go to Clemson. Enjoy your life. This is not a big deal. Why do you do this to yourself? I said, well, I said I'd get it done, and I feel really bad. He says, who cares? I realized that what really was going on was this. Basically, what was happening is the previous week, somebody in the hallway, the administrator might have been having just a conversation and said, I've always wondered how many Cessna 172s actually do crash in Southwest region. Man, I'm curious. I wonder. And someone heard that. They thought, oh, I'm going to get that for the administrator because they're trying to move up too on the pecking order. And as a result, they go to the person who works for them and says, hey, get me the numbers for 172s in Southwest region that crashed between 1995 and 2000. And then they go to their person beneath them, and who goes beneath them, and each time it gets elevated in, oh my gosh, it's for so-and-so, it's, oh my gosh, by the time it gets to me in Oklahoma, 3 days later, this thing is huge, when in fact, it really wasn't a big deal. And as a result, I'm pushing my people harder than I've ever pushed them. And as a result, sometimes to the breaking point. I would ask yourself how important it really is. Do we really have to do it today? We don't do that as management. We always just, yes sir, let's do it. The truth is, sometimes it isn't that important. And sometimes we have to look at the risk and the consequences. The other thing is overtasking. And this is another one that's a very easy one to fall prey to. Basically, and the example I give is, as a manager, when I had those 30-some-odd people working for me. And I can tell you, I had 5 people working for me. No matter what I asked them to do, they would do it better than you could ever imagine. I could have them, I could say, listen, I need you guys to go to my house. I want you to go into my backyard. I want you to find 10 piles of dog poop. And I want you to roll them into little balls, and I want you to bring them back and show me what you have. Now that's a pretty nasty task, right? Well, those people would go, they would do it. They wouldn't say a word. Absolutely, no problem. I'll be back in about an hour. And they'd go to my house, and they would roll the prettiest little dog poop balls. If I asked for 10, they'd give me 20. And they'd be so pretty you could put them on your shelf. I mean, I'm making this up, but the point is these people did anything you asked them to do, and they not only did it well, they did it better than well. They not only gave you what you asked for, but they gave you more. And if it meant they had to stay after work, they didn't complain, they just did it. You didn't ask them, they just did it. They were those high achievers, those people that everybody loves to have as an employee. And then I had the other 5 at the other end that everybody hates. These are the curmudgeons. These are the people that didn't like me, didn't like their job. No matter what I did, they weren't going to be happy. Those people, I don't even know if they liked breathing. They just weren't happy people, and nobody likes to work with them. And then I had the other 20 or so in the middle that were great employees, did their job, came to work at 8, they left at 4:30, they didn't take any work home, they didn't stay late, but they did, while they were there, they worked hard and they did a great job. But they didn't go above and beyond. So when I would interview managers for jobs, I would ask 2 very important questions after laying that scenario out with the top 5, the bottom 5, and the middle 20. The first question I would ask them was pretty easy. If you have a job that absolutely must get done, and done well, who are you going to give it to? It's pretty easy, right? The top 5. Yeah, that's who I'd give it to. That's the easy answer. Let me give you the tough question. If you have a job that's horrible, nobody will want it. Kind of the equivalent of cleaning toilets. I mean, it's just it's a bad job, but it's got to be done. Who are you going to give it to? Now, if you said, I'm going to give it to the bottom 5 because I don't like them anyways, wrong answer. Wrong answer. Because you're going to learn real quick if you have a union, the G word. It's called grievance. They're going to make your life miserable. They're going to report you. They're going to say that you're singling them out, which you may have been doing. But the truth is, your life is, they won't get it done, and it won't be done well. And they're going to make your life miserable. Who are you probably going to give it to? The top 5. Because you don't want to give it to the middle 20 because you don't want to turn them into the curmudgeons. And you know the top 5 won't complain. They won't complain, they'll get it done. But here's where the fun starts. Because now, the bottom 5's not doing very much. They're maybe juggling 1, maybe 2 balls. The middle group are juggling their 2 or 3 balls. And then the top group is juggling not only their balls, but the bottom group's balls. So they're juggling 5 or 6 balls. They're multitasking. So let me ask you this. If someone in the bottom 5 juggling their 1 or 2 balls drops a ball, doesn't get the job done, how does that make them feel? They don't care. In fact, if they were juggling 2 balls, they'll probably throw the other one on the ground too, just for fun. But what if someone from the top 5 who's juggling 6, 7 balls and they drop one, how do they feel? They practically decompensate. They can't handle it. They're so distraught and upset with themselves because they failed. They don't fail. They succeed. These people are so tightly wound. They want to do well for you, and then they just drop, and you set them up. Not only did you set up the people at the bottom, but you set up the people at the top, and we get what we call burnout. So that overtasking can lead to burnout or an adverse mental state, which can lead to bad decisions, and now they're dropping balls. This is a really bad situation. Well, we also have the failed to correct known problems. This is my own personal, this one really gets me wrapped up and really upset, because here what we're talking about are people that we know shouldn't be there. Have you ever been, we all know that there's certain people that just, you wonder, how in the heck did they get here? Oh my goodness, this person is scary. They don't have a clue. We've all met these people. Some of us have worked with them. Some of us have had them wait on us at tables or whatever. The fact is, there are people that sometimes just shouldn't have that job. I just came back off of a flight, and we were flying internationally over to London. And we had 6 stellar, absolutely great flight attendants. And one guy who just hated his job. This guy was just nasty. Not friendly, and I'm usually a jovial, happy guy, and this guy was not. This guy was horrible. How he got there, I don't know. But he didn't belong. And he was really making the rest of the passengers very uncomfortable. The truth is, what do you do? If you don't deal with those people, it can lead to big time problems. If you have a pilot who doesn't have the ability to fly, and we know right away what kind of talent they have, then they shouldn't be pilots. Do you want to go to a surgeon, a heart surgeon, that's okay? I tell my wife, I went to a traditional medical school, University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. And every year they bring in 1,000 new medical students. About 195 of them will graduate. And it's the second best school in Texas, and they have a lot of medical schools there. This is a great medical school. Southwestern's the best. But UTMB is second, and it's a fantastic medical school. If you graduate from UTMB, you're guaranteed to have a great slot, and you're going to do very well. However, like any university, they have their top people and they have their bottom people. And the people at the very bottom of that class of 195 that graduate, the bottom 15, I'm not sure I'd want them popping a pimple. These people were not very good. But let me tell you, they're all medical doctors. So you have to ask yourself, I've always wondered why people, when they go to a physician, they don't say, well, where'd you go to school? And if they went to some directional school, some Southwest Northern Louisiana state for something above a laundromat, that would make me nervous. Yeah. And I kind of want to know, I think I deserve to know, if you're going to do open heart surgery on me, where did you graduate in your class? Were you the top student or were you the bottom student? I'd like to kind of know. I want to do a little research. After all, my life's in his hands. Wouldn't you like to know how much experience those pilots have in the cockpit that's flying that commercial airliner you're going to get on tomorrow? Yeah, I'd like to know. Well, we don't. You're hoping that somebody that does see them as threatening or a safety hazard will say something and do something about it. That doesn't always happen, and as a result, sometimes I go to an accident scene, I've got a dead pilot, I can't talk to him unless you can communicate with the dead, and I can't. So I have to go talk to their friends. Nothing's worse than to hear somebody say, oh man, we knew that was going to happen. That guy was an accident waiting to happen. Really? Did you tell anybody? No? Well, you didn't do him any favors. He's dead. That, and he took about 20 people with him. That's criminal. So ask yourself, what are you going to do when someone's not qualified for a position that's very risky and has safety consequences? Are you going to do anything about it? If management doesn't, it sets people up for failure. Finally, we look at supervisory violations. These are rare, but they do occur occasionally. And what we're talking about here is supervisors who violate their own rules, or supervisors who encourage people to break the rules. For example, supervisors that walk into let's say I'm going out on a shop floor where everybody's required to wear their personal protective equipment, their PPE. They have to have their goggles, they have to have their helmet, they have to have their steel-toed shoes, they might even have a smock on or something to keep any kind of fragments from hitting them. They have their personal protective gear on. But the boss is walking through, he's not, I'm not going to mess up my hair with that helmet. And hey, I got these glasses, these are fine, I don't need the ones with the side shields. I'm just coming through for 5 minutes just to wave and say howdy. I've got my dress shoes on, not my steel-toed shoes. What kind of an example are you setting? Oftentimes when I go work with airlines and other industries, they always want to give you the royal tour. And in the U.S., I can assure you, you're never going to find yourself on a shop floor at an airline. They're not going to take you out into the hangar and out onto the flight line because you have to have certain permissions to do that. But I can tell you in Europe, I was walking out, hey, come on out, Doc, let's go show you what goes on over here in the hangar. And it's like, really? Well, okay. And then they'll come up, let me introduce you to Joe. And Joe's over here turning wrenches on one of the engines that's going to be flying maybe me or my family some other week. And he's over, hey, how you doing? Oh, hey, Doc, how's it going? Blah, 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 blah. I'm distracting him from his job, and what if he forgot to put one of those nuts on? And now the engine blows up. This is a big deal. So a lot of times supervisors don't even realize that they're breaking their own rules, and they're setting bad examples, and they're setting failures up. The other one is, and you'll see a lot of this, there's a lot of pressure to get things done. Supervisors are under an immense amount of pressure to keep the schedule going. And so it's not unusual to have a supervisor come in and say, I don't care how you get it done, I want those 10 widgets out the door by the end of the day. I don't care what you have to do. But hey, it takes it. I don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. Get it done. You've just sanctioned every shortcut in the book. And then when something goes wrong, and they come back and they say, well, but the boss told me to get, no matter what, just get it done. The boss can say, well, I didn't think he was going to break all the rules to do it. Oh, really? Just how did you expect him to get it done? When you make statements like that, people take them literally and consequently will get it done. When you force no one's going to stand up to the boss and go, not going to happen today. Nope. Especially if their job's on the line. Supervisors have to be smarter than that. Sometimes we encourage people to break the rules. And that's the sort of thing we're talking about. So we have this unsafe supervision, this what we'll call inadequate supervision, planned inappropriate activities, failed to correct known problems, and supervisory violations. It's a whole large area of endeavor, but I just kind of wanted to give you a quick overview of that. Finally, I want to talk to you about organizational influences. There are really 3 things we want to keep in mind. One is resource management. The other one is organizational climate, and then finally operational process. And let me just, by resource management, what do I mean? And now, bear in mind, what we're talking about here are people at the very highest levels. We're talking about the admirals, the generals. We're talking about presidents, vice presidents, CEOs of companies. The very highest level, board members. These are the people at the very highest levels. They're the decision makers, ultimately, for an organization. When I talk about resource management, the question I have for people is, how does the organization manage its human, its monetary, and its equipment resources? Do we hire the best people? Do we hire enough people? Are we downsizing? Do we have the right mix of people? A lot of times you'll find that sometimes people hire people for the wrong reasons. I just have to get it filled. This position just needs to be filled. I realize we don't have any good candidates, but if I need it filled now. We need warm bodies. Sometimes when money gets tight, what are the first things that go away? Well, operations have to maintain at a high level, so we still have to put the widgets out the door. But what you'll end up seeing is people oftentimes will start cutting corners with safety, training, travel, things that you can do without, but reduce the safety margin. As a result now, we're at risk for failure. So by downsizing and reducing and excessive cost cutting, supervisors may have no choice but to put the knuckleheads on the job. That may be all they're left with. And or they have to overtask people because I have to get the job done, but I don't have enough people to do it. As a result, people make mistakes. So is the fix at the pointy end of the spear? Is the problem with the employee? Or maybe it's higher in the system at the organizational level if we just looked up and been a little smarter when we were downsizing or cutting our costs. Sometimes we have to be smarter than we are. We don't think it through. We don't look at the cascade of events that could take place. Organizational climate. Here we look at the policies, the written and the unwritten. It's the unwritten ones that are really interesting. I mean, let's face it. Every industry has a policy that says if you're too sick or too tired to do your job, that's what we have sick leave for. Take the day off. In the airlines, if you're too sick or too tired to fly, you can request a relief pilot and you don't have to fly. That's the policy. But what's the practice? Go ask a pilot. If they're too sick or too tired to fly, can they call and ask for a relief pilot? And they'll kind of chuckle. Yeah, maybe once in a career. If you do it the second time, you're probably going to get called by the chief pilot and you're going to have questions along the lines of, are you really cut out for this job? There probably won't be a third time. How many of you haven't been sick 3 times in the last 10 years? We all have. We've all been tired. But if you're afraid for your job, you show up anyways. And that's a problem. We look at the structure of an organization. What is the structure? Where is the vice president for safety? Does VP safety report directly to the CEO, which would be a good thing? Or does the VP for safety report to the VP for ops? In other words, safety is reporting to operations. And remember, operations wants to get things out the door. What is safety's job? Well, let's get them out safely, which usually means slow it down, put safety procedures in place, which reduces the number of widgets we get out the door. So they're in direct conflict. So if you have the head of safety working for the head of operations, who do you think wins? Yeah. We look at the culture of the organization. The way we do business. What is our culture? What is the organization's who are they? What is their makeup? The way we do things. There is a Clemson way. There's a culture here at Clemson that's very different than, say, the culture at Ohio State, which is very different than the culture at Michigan or Nebraska. Everybody has, we're a small public school with a kind of a small town feel that's very different than if you go down in Austin to the University of Texas. It's a whole different feeling down there, trust me, I've been there. So the cultures differ depending on where you're at and what the way they do business. Finally, we look at the operational process. These are the procedures themselves, devised by the organization. Organizations put procedures in place to carry out the policies. Because in a matter of speaking, organizational climate is like our vision. It's the vision of an organization. This is our vision. And to carry out that vision, we have a process, which includes things like procedures, oversight from the very highest levels, Do the people at the top really know what's going on at the pointing of the spear? In many organizations, that's not the case. In many organizations, the top guy is completely divorced, separated from the rest of the organization. The top guy is sometimes just an accountant. A CEO is a finance guy. He's a bean counter. This is a guy that's all about money, but maybe didn't grow up. Maybe he's, the CEO of airlines are not pilots generally. Most of them are not pilots, did not grow up in the aviation industry. They came from some other industry, and now they're in charge of this one. They don't really know the way things go. And they don't really get out there and touch the other people. There's a really neat show on TV these days. It's a reality show. It's Undercover Boss, where you have these family-owned businesses or these large companies like, Hertz Rent-A-Car, or, it might be, they had the 1-800-Flowers, whoever those guys are, or, Chuck E. Cheese's or or McDonald's, the CEO of McDonald's. And what that CEO does is he goes undercover and he goes out into the world. He goes out and basically takes a job for a short period of time as a cook, or as somebody that's going to take the money or work the window when you're going through the drive-through. And he basically is going out there to get a sense of what his employees are going through. And it's very revealing because they find things out that they never knew were going on. Some good, some bad, because they're actually embedded in the job. And the people don't know he's the CEO, and then at the end, he reveals it and he brings them up to their headquarters and says, "Oh, I learned so much," and da-da-da, and it's really a very fun show. But the point I'm trying to make is that CEOs don't really know, in some cases, what's going on at the point of the spear. And every one of those CEOs went, "I learned a lot. There were things I didn't even know were going on." So, do people at the top really know what's going on at the bottom? Operations themselves, sometimes organizations grow so fast that they outgrow their infrastructure. They're buying up companies, they're doing things, and as a result, they don't have the people and the expertise in place to manage properly. They're just expanding so fast. So we look at these things. So basically what we've got is organizational climate, which is the vision of an organization. Operational process, which is the processor that we're going to use to carry out the vision. And then, of course, resource management, or the resources we need to carry out the process. So these are all three connected, which all have impact downstream as we go through this model. So basically, the three modules I provided you are the face of human factors. This is what human factors is. Now, is this perfect? No. Is it used by lots of folks? Absolutely. And they modify it here and there. They change the name here and there, which is no big deal. It's the principle. It's the fundamental philosophy of this that seems to be resonating in the industry. So I wanted to give you this as kind of an introduction to human factors as an overview. Obviously, there's a lot more detail, and we get into that in our human factors class and some of the other classes that I teach. But I wanted to give you a sense that there is some structure to it. From an engineering point of view, it's tangible. We can put our hands on most of this, and we can understand it. And if you understand this, you can predict human error, and you can improve safety. All right, we'll see you in the next module.